Good morning, good morning. Good morning to you here in Jamaica. Good morning to those listening to me in New York as well. This is Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. You know, I just heard Beauregard opening up the program from his end, and boy, I wish I could open my program with that kind of voice. But what can I tell you? He's a pro at it. I'm an amateur. But it's Jamaica Live. We're on this program. We're on this show every Monday from 12 to 2. So good afternoon. If I said good morning, forgive me. Good afternoon, everyone. There's an issue I wanted to raise before we even get into today's program. Have you been observing what is happening in Israel? Not just in Tel Aviv, but in a number of other cities in Israel, the demonstrations that are taking place. And I mean demonstrations, not PR business. Hundreds of thousands of people have been pouring out into the streets now for the last 3 weeks? And what are they protesting about? They are protesting an effort by the government to pass a law in Parliament, the Exec, or whatever they call it, that would enable Parliament to overrule the decisions of the highest court, the Supreme Court. Now, a cornerstone of any democracy is the independence of its judiciary. You must have a judiciary, a court system that is independent. You must have a court system, a judiciary that neither the government nor the Parliament can overrule its decision. On the contrary, a critical element of democracy is that the court must be there to overrule the decision of the government or a decision of the Parliament if they step out of line with the Constitution, if they seek to do something that is not allowed in the Constitution. And you know, I wonder what kind of Constitution they have in Israel, because I know it couldn't happen here. I mean, nobody could go to Parliament to pass no law here in Jamaica that gives Parliament the power to overturn a decision of the court. Our Constitution make it very clear you can't do that, you're mad. And that's why we must pay attention to what is happening in Israel. So the people here are protesting, and rightfully so. Last week, the Minister of Defense in Israel came out publicly to disagree with what the government is trying to do through Parliament. And the Prime Minister promptly fired him. What makes this action smell even more offensive is that the Prime Minister is currently on trial before the court on corruption charges. So that if they succeed in what they're trying to do in Parliament, it means that if the court were ever to find him guilty and sentence him to prison, all they would need to do is to go to Parliament and pass a resolution to overturn the decision of the court. I mean, what kind of democracy is that? You know, the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, he may have his own pernicious designs, you know, because he's the longest serving Prime Minister of Israel. And the longer he has been there, is the more he seems to have developed a notion that Israel can't survive without him. But what makes it worse is that he is now beholden to a group of right-wing extremists who helped him to become Prime Minister. His party didn't win enough seats in the last elections to become government. So he had to link up with a group of smaller parties who are made up of serious right-wing people. People who don't believe, for example, that Palestine should exist. People who don't believe that the Palestinians are entitled to have a homeland. So they are pushing for more aggression against the Palestinians, more Jewish settlements to be built in the West Bank, and so on. And in that sense, Netanyahu is in a similar position to the Speaker of the House in America, Kevin McCarthy. Because in order to become Speaker, he had to court the support of the right-wing extremists in the Republican Party. He couldn't have become, remember, they voted how many times? Was it 15 times before he could get a victory? Because some of them were holding out them, so they're not voting for him. So with every vote, he had to make more concessions, make more promises, accept more demands, until he finally was able to clinch the speakership. So McCarthy is not his own man. Whatever may be his own inclinations, he's like a bulldog on a leash. And the leash is in the hands of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz. They're the ones who yank the leash and tell him who to sick and when to bark. The same thing is happening with Netanyahu in Israel. We need to watch that one. Watch that carefully. But what it is doing, it is unraveling the work that people like former Prime Minister Menachem Begin did to try and reach some kind of accommodation, some kind of an agreement with the Palestinians. There were still issues that they had to work out, and they, up to now, those issues have not been resolved. Issues to do, for example, with the continued practice of, as I said before, building Jewish settlements in the West Bank. And the intention there, of course, the objective is to dilute the strength of the Palestinians in those areas. And then, of course, there is the unresolved question as to who does Jerusalem belong to. The Palestinians claim that it is theirs, and the Israelis claim that it is theirs, they're not giving it up. So whether that situation can ever be solved, I'm not sure. But what is very clear is that the direction in which Israel is going now is not a good one. And it must be causing headaches to all of the people who have supported Israel so heavily, including the United States, to see what is going on. And I don't know to what extent they are going to be able to exercise some influence to say to him, no, you can't go there. You can't overrule the court, you're mad. Weird. But that's not the discussion for today. Coming to that as soon as I come back. There's an issue that our health officials and education officials have been sounding the alarm about that I don't think we have been paying sufficiently serious attention to. It is the state of nutrition among our children. A healthy diet is not just for adults when they get older and start coming down with all sorts of ailments. A child who is brought up on a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle stands a better chance of becoming a healthy adult and less chance of developing the kind of ailments that so many of us suffer from as we get older. What kind of food are your children eating when they are at home? What kind of food are they eating when they go to school? It is especially important for infants. The human body is made up of about 80 different organs. And it is made up of trillions, hear what I say? Trillions of cells. It is in the early years of life that most of the development of these cells and organs occur. Do you know, for example, that 90% of the brain's development takes place by the time a child reaches 5 years of age? 90% of that child's brain has developed. Of course, a 5-year-old child don't have knowledge yet, but the brain is developed and ready now to accept knowledge. The immune system is what the body uses to ward off diseases and infections. It is the immune system that does the repair work when the body is injured. That immune system is built in the very early years of life. And that is why mothers are encouraged to breastfeed their babies, because breast milk contains the natural antibodies to build the immune system that no medical science has been able to produce a baby formula that is as effective as the mother's breast milk in building that immune system. So what our children eat and drink goes a long way in determining what kind of life they will live, how healthy they will be, what capacity they will have for learning and for doing well in school. But pass by most schools during school hours and look at how many vendors you will see at the school gate selling all kinds of things that children enjoy so much. But much of what they like to consume, the pastries, the fast foods, the sweets, you could think them in the cellophane package. Most of those things are not good for them. They contain way too much sugar, too much sodium, too much saturated fat. I looked at a UNICEF report that was published 2 years ago, and it showed that 31% of Jamaican children between the ages of 5 and 19 are overweight. 31% of the children between 5 and 19. Overweight. Them too fat. When children are overweight, the body normalizes that excess weight. And there's a 99% chance that that is how they will grow up. Fat children normally become fat adults. And they will grow into obese men and women. And when that happens, it causes the vital organs like the heart and the lungs and the liver and the kidneys to have to work overtime because of this enormous amount of weight that it has to service. No wonder we have such a high incidence of heart disease in Jamaica, such a high incidence of diabetes, of hypertension, high blood pressure, strokes. Some data was produced by the Ministry of Health. They did a survey, when was it? 2020, I think it was. 54% of Jamaicans over 15 years old. These are adolescents and adults. 54%, that means more than half of the population over 15 years old suffers from obesity. Some of them severe obesity, some of them not so severe, but they're still overweight. 33%, 1 in 3 Jamaicans over 15 years old suffer from hypertension, high blood pressure. And 12% suffer from diabetes. And diabetes, as you know, can lead to kidney problems, kidney failure. And when the kidney fail, one of two things happen. You either go on dialysis or you die, or one of 3. Or if you are fortunate and you have the resources, you get a kidney transplant. I have yet to come across a child, that does not go crazy over ice cream. And if you were to ban ice cream from children altogether, you could well be guilty of cruelty to children. But ice cream contains a whole heap of sugar and a whole heap of animal fat if they make it from cow's milk, and most ice creams are made from cow's milk. So, for example, I can't deprive my grandchildren of ice cream, but I can certainly insist that they mustn't have too much of it, and they mustn't have it every day. Now, last year, the government put out a national school nutrition policy, which provides guidance as to the type of foods that school children should consume and the type that should be avoided or consumed in moderation. And we are very good at formulating policies. I can't think of any important aspect of life for which we don't have a policy. Sometimes the policies may become outdated and we need to have them reviewed and reformulated. Our problem is hardly ever an absence of policies. It is the enforcement. That is where we have a problem, a big problem. And the biggest part of that problem is that implementation depends on all of us, not just the government, not just the officials who are directly involved in the matter. The government has a policy regarding how trash and litter and garbage should be disposed of. It has more than a policy. It has laws on the books. But if some of us insist on dumping our garbage in the drains and gullies, or throwing lunch boxes and box juice cartons out of the car window, what do we say? We can't put a policeman at every 2 chains along the gully bank to catch people who are inclined to dump garbage. We can't do that. We can't have a patrol car follow every vehicle to see when they're throwing something out of the car window so you can stop them and prosecute them. Take this new National School Nutrition Policy. The Ministry of Education and the school officials have to make sure that the policy guidelines are being followed in terms of what kind of meals are provided at school for lunch for the children, or breakfast in some cases. The government has a responsibility to make sure that the ministry and the school officials are provided with the resources to enable them to do this. But if when the children go home from school, they are being fed foods that have too much salt, too much sugar, too much saturated fat, cooked in too much oil, if the junk food that we buy at the fast food places becomes a constant feature of their diet, then we must know that what we are doing is guiding them on a path towards obesity, a path towards high blood pressure, stroke, diabetes, heart disease, and all sorts of sickness that the body would have been trained and prepared to acquire as they get older. And when that happens to the children, when they get older in later life, it is we, not they, who should bear the brunt of the blame, even if we are dead and gone by that time. So that is our issue today. We're talking about the nutrition of our children. What are they eating, and what is our responsibility as parents and adults to make sure that they're eating the right things? We have some guests that we're going to be bringing on. But before I do that, can I hail up Beauregard now? Bo.
Good afternoon, Mr. Golden, sir.
Hey, how you doing, big man?
Doing great. Here enjoying the weather in New York City, you know.
You have good weather?
Great weather. We're getting there. Spring is here.
Well, you should be glad you're not in Mississippi.
No, sir. Unfortunately, we heard about those tornadoes and devastating floods, yes.
I gather it's the worst that they've ever experienced there, no?
I am not sure if it's the worst, but they've experienced some very devastating weather before.
Yeah, the death toll the last time I checked was what, 25?
I believe so, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Over 20, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
The contrast keeps hitting me, you know, because 1 minute you're having forest fires.
Mm-hmm.
Next minute you're having floods.
Yes, sir. And in some places where we wouldn't normally expect it.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
so it's very crazy right now.
But then some people say that climate change is a hoax. No?
Yes, so you have people who say that, and you have people who actually believe that climate change is taking place. So, you know, we just have to go day by day, live day by day, and hope for the best.
The problem is that many of those who believe that is a hoax are not the ones who are suffering the devastation.
True.
That's what can I tell you. But good to hear you.
Great to hear you too.
We're talking about children nutrition today. I think it's an important subject that we need to spend a little time on.
Very important.
Yeah.
Very important.
All right, Bo.
Okay, sir.
All right, I want to bring on now my first guest for today, who is Miss Shannique Bowden. Let me tell you about her. She's the executive director of the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, JYAN as they call themselves, which is a very important group and very committed group. What they're doing is bringing the minds of young people together and focusing those minds on issues in a positive way that they think are important to the country and important to their own future and development in the country. Ms. Bowden, welcome to the program.
Hi, good afternoon. Very excited to be here.
Good, nice to have you. Now, the Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network has been quite vocal and has taken up this issue of nutrition, particularly among our school children. Mm-hmm. What makes it so important an issue that you feel that it ought to deserve your input and your activism?
So for JYAN, we're very committed to the general well-being and welfare of adolescents and young people. And while we advocate for many issues affecting persons such as abuse, the right to education, all that may be limited, we found that nutrition is also just one way in which our children need to be protected in terms of the access to healthy foods that they're getting, or the access to the type of food that they're getting, which should be healthier and should be more nutritious for them. So we tapped into this advocacy area about 2 years ago when we became aware that the government was working on a nutrition policy, and we wanted to ensure that as best as possible this policy, when it comes to fruition, would reflect what we deem to be the best interest of the child, what we deem to be what is necessary for our young people to grow into healthier adults. And so the school nutrition policy, and especially the school environment, is the first step to addressing what we use to describe at length some of the issues affecting our children in terms of the NCD rates and those sort of other issues.
How can we actualize that policy, though? As I made a point earlier that we're hardly ever short of policies. Our big problem
That's
is
true.
how to apply them, how to enforce them. And I made the point as well that the enforcement is not just the responsibility of the authorities.
That's true.
All of us are involved. I mean, when you're at home with your child, what you're feeding that child on has to be influenced by the policy.
Right.
But are our people sensitized, or is it that they cook the dinner with a whole heap of salt in it and a whole heap of cooking oil, and they believe that once the picnic belly full, that the picnic has been taken care of? How do we get them to understand? No, you have to start looking at what it is that you're feeding your children on. How do we evangelize that approach?
Yeah, that's actually a very excellent question. I think one of the positions that we've been taking is that there's no really such thing as bad food. Yes, there are things that are not good for us, but we can take those things and make them healthier. So in the same way that we enjoy fried chicken as we do, perhaps we can still enjoy our fried chicken, but not every day. And so we kind of take that approach. You mentioned sensitization, and that's definitely something that JYAN ourselves have been doing as part of our organization, but we also acknowledge that the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health are also playing a role in doing sensitization as well. In the latter quarter of last year, there was an extensive consultation process that took place around the policy, where they spoke with teachers, students, parents, vendors, everyone who's involved in ensuring that children are having access to food in school, to get them abreast of what the policy entails, and to also impress upon them their own role that they will have to play once the policy is finalized. And so I think definitely there's way more room for sensitization to continue, but I think that we can diversify the way in which we are talking about nutrition from a place of what we already have and what we're used to, and how we can just improve on the things that we're used to, as opposed to this is just bad and you just need to cut that out and move on. But basically meet people at the place where they are and what they're able to afford and what they're able to prepare, and just sensitize how they can do so in a more healthy way. And one other point, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, no, I said one other point that I also quite like about what the policy its position itself to be is that they also are including a more robust curriculum around nutrition education and development to ensure that children themselves within their school curriculum can learn how to prepare healthy meals, can understand the consequences of too much salt or too much sugar or even not enough salt in their diet and that sort of stuff. So I think it's just really being a bit more mindful and being more mindful of just our own economy, our own culture and those sort of stuff, and how we can just, position ourselves in a way that meet people where they are and just improve on that position.
Well, that's the very point I wanted to probe you on, because we have to target the message all around. I mean, the parents certainly, to the extent that they have a supervisory role to play, but as you pointed out, the children themselves need to be properly educated as to how to take care of their bodies and how to feed that body with the right kind of thing, because a parent who gives a child lunch money, for example, doesn't really have any control over what that child is buying from the school gate vendor. Mm-hmm. But if the child is taught that certain things are not good for you, I mean, I give credit to one of my daughters, because even when those grandchildren are with me, if I offer them Pepsi, they'll say, no, mommy doesn't allow us to drink that. Because they've been brought up to be aware of the amount of sugar that are in soft drinks. But I hope, I'm going to be speaking with Minister of State Juliet Cuthbert-Flynn once I'm through with you, and I'm going to raise with her what is the nature of the public education program, how intense it is, and how is it being executed, because that is important. If we get to the stage, you see, where both parents and children understand what is good for you and what is not good for you, what you should have in moderation, but what you should have plenty of, like the fruits and vegetables. If they understand it themselves, then at least if they know they're stepping out of line, if they step out of line, they will know that they're stepping out of line. It's not that they didn't understand what they were doing.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, I'd love to share with you, we've been, as part of our own advocacy and our own programs, we've been going into schools to talk to students about the school nutrition policy. And I definitely agree with the point that you made, that the students themselves need to be involved and need to also be part of that public education. But especially, and I take the point when you were talking about your granddaughters, that the younger kids, they're very much abreast. And I think it goes back to just like the basics of grow food, and what they're learning there. But we visited Mona Heights Primary last week, and we were just kind of blown away with just their knowledge, and they were telling us things that we came to tell them. So I definitely think if we, like I said, meet the students where they are, and giving them the information in a way that they can appreciate and understand it, then the implementation will go a long way.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the work that you're doing. I think, and it's important, because I think that speaking as young people yourself, I believe that what you say will have an even more persuasive impact on our young people out there. So let me congratulate you. Wish you all the best in this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. We take a break. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nutrition, particularly nutrition as it applies to our children. And we're very pleased now to be joined by Dr. Susan Soares-Wynter, who is a clinical nutritionist attached to the Caribbean Institute of Health Research at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Soares-Wynter, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad you were able to join me. Tell me.
I'm glad to be here.
Yes. Tell me, nutrition. Explain to me what has brought it into such prominence now in terms of concerns.
Okay, well, if we do a little bit of a historical review, so if you think back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was an issue with more undernutrition. So, our population generally had larger prevalence of malnutrition. Children were suffering from severe malnutrition and undernutrition. So our school feeding program would have catered to that set. Coming into now a situation where, food is just more readily available, it's wider variety, food is more accessible, it's more affordable. We have now gone through what is termed a nutrition transition, where we've become more westernized in our diet. So instead of those, traditional foods like ground provision and so on, we are gone to that more westernized, refined foods, ultra-processed foods, lots more sugar, flour. Food is now convenient. We have fast food at every stop, so we've switched to now children becoming overweight. And not just our children, our population. So even across the Caribbean right now, 1 in 2 adults is either overweight or obese. And in Jamaica, more and more, depending on the age range. So I know in the adolescent age group, maybe 1 in 4 children is overweight or obese. And in a study that we just completed, well, not just in a few years ago, those primary school children, it's 1 in 3 of them that is overweight or obese. So we're now seeing children on the other side of the spectrum of overweight. And it is a problem because overweight, just like with adults, increases their chances of getting hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol. For children, it affects their development. So there are many issues that come from being overweight. So that is the problem that we're seeing now.
Have you been able
to...
we're
trying to correct it.
Have you been able to identify the main culprit in that obesity? Is it sugar?
Yes. So generally in the adult population, it's really just a matter of unhealthy diets. That's actually the primary cause, unhealthy diets. And, we're not really an active group, so we're not doing as much activity. And for the children especially in the adolescent age group, there are large national surveys that show children who drink just 1 sugary drink per day increase their chance of overweight. And there are others that, like fast food. So fast food is another dietary factor that contributes to this overweight.
Now tell me.
And so sugar specifically, if you think of just a sugary drink, which is 1 item in the diet as opposed to a pattern of eating, then yes, our sugary drinks are causing our children to get overweight.
Now, tell me, are sugar substitutes any good for us?
Well, the data is now showing that even though they have no calories, so the thing with sugar substitutes are what they call the non-nutritive sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. They don't have calories, so they don't act in the same way that sugar would have in terms of calories. But what it is that these sweeteners tend to be hundreds times sweeter than sugar. And so what they're showing is that they can affect how your gut bacteria behaves. They can give you, because they're so intensely sweet, you get that propensity, you want sweeter things. And so you find that when people are drinking these things, you tend to want even sweeter things. And so you find that people who go on these kind of sweeteners, you may not want the less sweet things like fruits, because they now don't taste as well. When you have a sweet drink, if you eat a fruit after, the fruit just doesn't taste as sweet. It's the same concept. And so what can happen is that people just eat more and more.
How do we manage our taste, though? Let me give you an anecdote. Mm-hmm. There's a good friend of mine who had serious heart problems, had to have surgery and so on, a couple of years ago. I had lunch with him a few months ago. We were at this restaurant and we both ordered fried fish. Now, the waiter brought the fish and put 1 plate in front of me and 1 in front of him, and then she said, no, mistake. She had given me the wrong one. I said, but it's the same thing. And she said, no, his own is fried without salt. So I said to him, I said, how do you eat fried fish without salt? It can't taste good. He said, once you have become accustomed to the taste, you don't miss the salt at all. Can the human adapt to that kind of extent?
You sure can. So going back again, when you're a baby, babies on breast milk, they're accustomed to that taste. The minute you add sugar to their porridge, for instance, or you give them a sweeter formula, it's an acquired taste. And so because it's more preferential, it's more desirable. So it means that the next time they go drinking, they won't necessarily go back to the breast milk. They want the sweeter things.
Yes.
And there are some studies that show that, even how sugar acts on your brain is nearly like how cocaine will act, where it actually sends off those pleasure centers. And so the more sweet you have each time is the sweeter you want your drink.
So are you suggesting that if that mother, once she stops breastfeeding, if she were to make that porridge but don't put any sugar in it, that baby wouldn't know the difference?
Would not know the difference, would continue eating it like normal. There are many children who grow up like that, where they never ever have sugar. They go about, and it's the same thing with salt. So it's an acquired taste, and if you want to do the reverse, so your friend who had cut back on salt and stopped, in the same way, because it's nearly retraining your brain. So if over time you start to reduce the amount of salt, so stop adding salt at the table, maybe not use as much powdered seasoning, but use fresh seasonings. And yes, maybe the first 2 or 3 days it will taste a little odd, but if you push and you continue, typically there are some studies that show maybe between 7 days to 21 days, your taste buds can actually adapt to that no salt flavor. And so we have actually done studies at CARE where we have put people on no salt diets, where we took them off all added salts. For 2 weeks, their blood pressures went down. Many people stopped retaining fluids. They felt much better. They slept better. They stopped having headaches. And the minute they went back off the trial, and, there was one gentleman who went to buy some fast food, some fried chicken, and the minute he tasted it, he said he spat it out because he said it nearly tasted like it was acidic. It was burning his tongue. But it was because he had actually gotten accustomed to eating a low-salt diet. So it is something that you can adapt to, because the reverse is true. You can adapt to just drinking sweeter and sweeter and sweeter, that you don't realize how much more sugar you're having.
But isn't there much more that we can do quite effortlessly if we were to change the way in which we prepare some of our foods? In other words, instead of the fried chicken, if we had baked chicken. I went somewhere recently and had poached chicken, and I enjoyed it. Poached chicken is not something that I'm accustomed to having. But is there much more that we could do, even if we can't tear ourselves away from the salt? But perhaps cut down. But rather than frying that chicken in a whole pot of oil, are there things we can do to improve the healthiness of our food?
Absolutely. So, anything with behavior change starts with just being aware, increasing your awareness, understanding that, there's a risk to eating high salt, high sugar, high fat, especially the unhealthy fats like the saturated fats and the trans fats. And so the first stage of behavior change is actually awareness and knowledge. So understanding, well, what am I eating that may be causing me, because each of us is different, what is causing me to be taking in more calories or more salt that I shouldn't be taking in? And so you start looking around, and most people know what the healthy foods are not, or not. And so, yes, if we know in Jamaica, our NCDs are non-communicable diseases, so hypertension, there are many people walking around who don't even know that they have high blood pressure because it's not something you feel. Also diabetes. So one of the first things you want to do is perhaps just look and see, well, are you having too much salt? Do you add salt to the tables? Are you using a lot of powdered seasonings? Are you using a lot of the ultra-processed, like packaged foods that, there are people who, they don't rinse off their canned vegetables even though it's stored in salt water. And it's not to say that you cannot have those foods at all, but it's a frequency in which you're having it. And it's the same thing with your sweet drinks. Okay, maybe you can't go to cold turkey by drinking water alone, but perhaps instead of making it a sweet drink at every drink you have, so even your tea, your coffee, your mid-morning drink, we live in a hot country, so we're constantly thirsty, then maybe start diluting your beverage. Put more ice in it. Maybe instead of having a sweet drink at every instance, have it only at your main meal, and you keep cutting back until you can actually go without, or you just limit it. And the more you get accustomed to a less sweet drink, it's actually the reverse will be the same. As you said with the chicken, instead of frying it, each time you leave the skin on meat, and then if you put a batter on it, it's nearly as if you are doubling the skin, and the skin is what has all the cholesterol and the unhealthy fats. Yes, bake it. Grilled chicken, jerk chicken is much healthier than a fried chicken with the skin.
Tell me, Dr. Soares-Wynter, is there a trade-off between unhealthy food and exercise? I mean, if I say, well, I love my fried chicken, and I love my malted milk and my Pepsi Cola, but I jog 2 miles a day. Is there a trade-off there?
It's not so simple. So in a very rough description, how much ever calories you eat, for you to remain stable, you have to burn the same amount of calories. So if you want to lose weight, you either have to cut down on the calories that you're eating or exercise more. The problem is that it's very easy for us to eat a lot of calories relative to the amount of exercise that you need to burn. So for instance, a patty, we all love patties, but a patty is roughly between 350 and 500 calories depending on the type that you have. For you to burn that amount, you have to walk very briskly, maybe even on an incline for 2 hours.
What? For one patty?
For one patty. Because walking for an hour might just be 250 to 300 calories. If you eat something like a cheesecake, those cheesecakes with the whipped cream and the strawberries on top, that's probably about 1,000 calories. We have estimated that somebody may have to run on a treadmill for about an hour or an elliptical for an hour, and then you probably have to do like 60 lunges because the amount of calories.
I'm going to stop talking to you because I love cheesecake.
No, so nobody said you can't have it. You just don't have it every day. And one of the things I tell my patients that instead of eating the generic one that you don't really like, but you think you're enjoying it, wait till I've walked enough, I've cut down on how much fried foods and sweet drinks I've had for the week. So this weekend, I'm going to have myself one nice slice of my favorite cheesecake.
But is it not true to say as well, though, you are the expert, I'm not, is it not true to say that exercise, no matter how active you are, no matter how much you jog every morning, that some of these unhealthy foods, the trans fats, for example, it is piling up cholesterol inside of you. Is it not true to say that no matter how much exercise you do, there's still damage that's being done by some of these foods?
Yes, and just to state that, there are many people who will say, no, but I run and, I go to the gym for an entire hour every day. But what do you do for the other 23 hours? Many of us nowadays are sitting down behind a desk, or we're not moving up and down as much. We go to the office and we're sitting down, or we're in a car. And so what do you do for the other 23 hours out of the day? And yes, independently of exercise, yes, salt, trans fats, saturated fats, they do affect your body. So yes, we know the saturated fats, they do contribute to formation of plaque in your arteries. They can affect your heart wall itself. Sugar, we know, affects your insulin and your liver. Sugar, one of the most common NCDs with sugar is just dental caries, cavities. You know, we all at some stage or the other from children have had a dentist tell us, listen, you need to brush your teeth more because you're either developing or you will soon develop a cavity. So it can affect nearly every organ in the body is affected by sugar in some way.
Help me with another notion that I've heard, and that is that young people, their bodies are so young and so capable that they can take the wear and tear of unhealthy foods. It's when you get older that you have to be careful. That's foolishness, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And because unfortunately that's exactly why we're seeing so many children, young children, babies who are overweight and obese because their body just cannot fight back the kind of foods that they're eating. You know, 30 years ago we didn't have fast food at every stop, and it's to get people to understand that fast food isn't just the American hamburger and pizza and hot dog. We have our own version of fast food here in Jamaica with a box lunch. You know, you can get a box lunch now, but it's because it's cooked in the same way. Lots of salt, lots of sugar, lots of unhealthy fats. It's quick, it's convenient, usually served in a large amount. So because we're eating those foods and we're relying on a lot of these processed foods which have a lot of preservatives, coloring, you look at some ingredient listings now and you can't even pronounce the names because of what is in there. And so those are things that you're putting into your body that really will affect you. So it doesn't matter what age you are. And we are showing that children are actually being affected. It's affecting their development. So, you know, it's affecting their mental and physical development with some of the foods.
What do you say to the low-wage earner who might argue that, well, I hear what you say, and what you say makes sense, but healthy food's too expensive. I can buy 2 pounds of flour and make some dumpling with that and buy some chicken back and cook it up with some oil, and that don't cost no whole lot of money.
Well, that's actually a much better option than if they were to buy like the sweet biscuit and the cheese curls and the bag juice, which is what many parents are actually buying. Very few of them are actually thinking of buying flour or yam, because they think that those things are expensive, but they're actually not expensive. When you look at some of these snack foods that children are buying, I mean, we see it in the schools where parents will give their children money and the children they're buying snacks for the children, cheese curls and sweet biscuit and bag juice, box drink, let me not say juice. And it's to educate them to say, hey, you know, why don't you, it's better for you to buy your child a ripe banana. Or even if it is that dumpling with that chicken neck, which is at least you're getting protein and some carb, you know, rather than these cheese curls or so on, which have no nutrients.
Yes. Are our children getting a sufficient portion of vegetables in their diet?
Unfortunately, no. So and this is not just the children. For a country that has wild fruits and vegetables growing wild, we are very low consumers of fruits and vegetables. We are not consuming, even if people are report having fruit and vegetables, they are not eating adequate amounts.
Why is
and
that? Is that a problem in the brain again? Because I remember as a child, I will confess, as a child, I didn't like vegetables. But I had a grandmother who wouldn't allow me to leave the dining table until I had it. And I was anxious to leave the dining table to go play football next door. But I didn't find vegetables to be particularly tasty.
Did you eat fruits?
Yeah, I love fruits. But I didn't like vegetables.
Okay, well, at least you ate one out of the two, and it's plant-based. It offers the same fiber and so on. Fruits are really, I mean, if I'm to be just very general, fruits are really just sweetened forms of vegetables. And once you eat a variety, because that's where we get most of our vitamins and minerals from, or many of them. And so I think it is that, more and more people migration to the city parts where maybe fresh fruit are not available so much on trees, so much more people are living in apartments, multifamily units, rather than having... Kingston is actually a relatively green city because most houses, even in the city, will have an ackee tree, a mango tree, or if you don't have it, your neighbor has it.
Yeah, but the problem though...
And so we grew up with that, but many parents now, they themselves don't eat it. And if they don't eat it, they're not going to necessarily give it to their children.
Well, the problem is two things. One is, a lot depends on how it is prepared, I don't know whether we don't need to retrain ourselves, because I love vegetables now. But it, when it's prepared in a particular way, I don't like vegetables that are overcooked, for example, and that used to be part of my problem when I was a kid. But part of our problem, though, which is why I keep focusing on vegetables. I'm a frequent visitor to the supermarkets. The cost of fruits in Jamaica is horrendous, when compared to vegetables. I mean, you can pick up a pound of string beans relatively cheaply, but try buying a papaya or try buying a melon in a supermarket.
Right. So one of the things that we always try to advise persons, especially persons living on a budget, you want to go for those things that are in season. You want to go for things that are local. And yes, it's unfortunate. We do have a lot of farmers in the rural parts that have their things, but, they get it to Kingston and maybe the transport and everything. And sometimes many of us are now, instead of going to the market where it's much cheaper, we're going to a supermarket. I remember, around the Gilbert period is when we didn't have any fruits. So that's when they started to bring in these imported fruits. And we have gotten that taste, not realizing that we have a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables available here. So again, the first thing is really awareness. Yes.
How much?
From a baby, parents need to learn in the same way that they have, really just added sugar and salt. It's to not add the sugar and salt, but start introducing your children to different fruits and vegetables from that age. And over time, you will find, and if you as a parent will eat it, because if your child sees you eating it, for those of us who grew up eating fruits and vegetables and it wasn't an issue, it's because we grew up seeing our adult parents or adults around us eating it and not making an issue about it. So we didn't have anybody saying, no, you better sit here and eat this or else. We didn't assign it. We didn't align it with punishment. And so now, even for... Yes, I do have adult patients who don't eat vegetables, and what I will do is tell them, hey, next time you're having soup, why not blend in the pumpkin into the soup, or blend it in first, so at least you're getting it in without having to taste it. Instead of eating, you're going to some of restaurants now, and all of a sudden everybody wants to give you 5 cups of vegetables as a dish. You don't need, that's nearly your whole day's worth of vegetables. So why not, if you're making a sandwich, put the leaf of lettuce in it and start there, where it's mixed in with something that you like the taste of, but you don't have to feel like you're eating just a vegetable alone. And if you try, nobody's saying that you have to eat a particular type of vegetables. There's a variety. And the more you try, and even if it's just to taste it, just like what we do with children, even if it's just for them to smell it and taste it, and maybe the next time they might actually put someone in their mouth and taste it. And over time, like you, even if it takes a while, eventually you will get to learn it.
Tell me, before we go, how well have we done in terms of public awareness, public sensitization? How well have we done in making this an issue in every household in Jamaica?
Okay, well, CARE works very closely with advocacy groups like the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, UNICEF, PAHO. And what you may recall a few years ago where, they came out with awareness campaign on just the dangers of sugary drinks, just to get people to understand the dangers of drinking so much sugar and the calories. And yes, the simple message was stop drinking the sugary drinks and replace it with water and a fruit. And that helps by cutting down on not just the sugar, getting people to recognize drinking water is an option, but also encouraging people, hey, try having a fruit instead. So because obesity is so widespread in Jamaica, we do need that education. More and more restaurants, if they have started to incorporate vegetables in your meal. So you're not just getting curry chicken alone anymore. You're getting curry chicken with carrot and potato in there. You're getting a lot more restaurants that will serve you a good amount of vegetables and not just a little teaspoon of vegetables on the side of the plate. You've seen a lot more people serving things like yam, breadfruit, bananas. Because remember, those are also vegetables, but they're the starchy vegetables. But the whole idea is to go for a plant-based diet.
Yeah, you've been very good to us today. I found your contribution to be very, very valuable and very helpful. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Susan Soares-Wynter, who is a clinical nutritionist at the Caribbean Institute of Health Research. We take the break. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nutrition, particularly as it affects children. But as the conversations have proceeded, it is becoming clearer and clearer that this is not just a picnic issue. It's an issue that affects all of us. We're very, very pleased to be joined now by the Minister of State in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Member of Parliament, and outstanding Olympian, Mrs. Juliet Cuthbert-Flynn. Minister, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me clearly? Good afternoon.
I'm hearing you clearly, and I would not have done this program without you.
Well, thanks for having me.
Tell me, the government has recently put out a nutrition policy for schools, but I must acknowledge that your ministry has been on this nutrition issue for quite a long time. I mean, you have had Jamaica Moves, you've been sounding the warning against sugary drinks and too much sodium. You've been leading a crusade about appropriate package labeling and so on. For the Ministry of Health, it's a much wider issue than just children, no?
Definitely, except that, as you just mentioned, we have a focus on our children because, I believe if you train a child in a particular way, when they grow up, they will follow whatever the example is as they become adults. And if it is that we want to have a healthier nation, we have to focus on the nutrition as well as the physical. If we want our healthcare bills to go down, and if it is that we want to, not have so many people sick with NCDs in our country and die from the NCDs, as you know, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, it's one of the main killers of our Jamaican population. And if it is that we want to spend less, we must look at the preventative measures. And there must be a need to look at the younger children from our primary school level going up to high school to make sure that the nutrition is on point and also the physical activity.
How responsive have we been? By we, I mean the society at large. How responsive have we been to your efforts? I mean, we still throw litter out of car windows. We still break traffic signs. Is it that, yes, I hear what the minister is saying, I hear what Mr. Dr. Tufton is saying. I mean, know it right, but boy, I'm just stubborn. Me ears hard. Has that been our response?
I think it's a mixed response. I think people were listening. I think when Minister Tufton came out with this a few years ago, a lot of people really jumped on it. And I think a lot of people started drinking more water. I also believe the manufacturers were also listening, and we see all the water ads out there. And so, we see social media influencers, using those taglines as well, coming in with the manufacturers to, promote water drinking. And so I think with what Minister Tufton did back then, I think it resonated with a number of Jamaicans. I'm not sure, though, that it has to be a sustained thing. So it can't be just we do it and then stop. And so, for sure, this is why we started the campaign of Jamaica Moves in Schools, because we must target the younger ones to even help their parents. Some of these children, they're the ones to say, hey, mommy, maybe today I'll have water day instead of bringing a juice to school. Or the children at school may say, I may not drink the sweet drink today, I will have water. And so I think it's going to take a number of years to really get the population on the right path to say we must eat healthier. And so this has to be sustained. And at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, along with Minister Tufton and myself and the team, will definitely continue to push the messages. And you'll see some ramping up of messaging, especially for the youngsters in a few more weeks and months.
Minister, is there some more muscle that we need to put alongside the public appeal? Let me explain what I mean. I go to the supermarket sometimes, and I notice now that I see two different types of bully beef. One of them has on the label less sodium. Should we now not be considering, well, look, if you can produce bully beef with less sodium, well, we're not going to allow no bully beef into the country again with a high sodium. If everything now has to be less sodium. Ought we not to be considering some of these types of things?
Well, you are right, and I think Minister Tufton, he has been preaching that. We've had the salt and the sugar studies in Jamaica. I think we've seen him on TV with the different persons who have done these studies to actually tell what as you mentioned, the labeling, along with the Heart Foundation. We're trying to push that. I think what we have to do, though, is to get the manufacturers on board, right? We have to get the people who are making these things on board to make sure that our citizens understand, what it is that they're consuming. What does, the amount of salt, the percentage is. And I think the packaging on the labels, I think, is crucial. I think it's important for us to have our packages labeled properly so persons can understand what it is that they're consuming and what kind of effect that would have on their bodies if they consume too much of if it's salt or sugar. And so I think it has to be a buy-in by the consumers and also the manufacturers. And I think that is something that is being worked on as we speak.
How robust is your communication program? I mean, are you getting through to people on these issues? I remember shortly after independence, and it was something that Mr. Siaga was credited for. He had this program on what was then JIS. It subsequently became API, and I went back to JIS. But he had a program there called Dulcimina. I don't know if you're too young to remember.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no. I remember Dulcimina.
And the program was produced by the late Mutty Perkins' wife, who is also deceased now. But it was a useful means. This was a means of getting to people in a kind of language and in a kind of context that they understood. And a lot of the messages that the government thought was important, such as what we're talking about here, that was the most effective means of getting it out there. Now, that's a long time ago, and things that have changed, and communication media have changed. But I kind of get a sense, though, that we need to more intensely evangelize this issue and get to the point now where in our schools they're talking about it, in our communities, in our parent-teachers association meetings, citizens association, at church the pastor must find a little time in a half-hour sermon to talk about it. Can we get that sort of robust communication strategy going?
And I think you are right. That is what Jamaica Moves is really about. And we must get into the communities. We're getting the communities on board, the churches on board, the little corners on board. In the schools, we have to get everybody on board and have the communication. As you said, it has to be a consistent, constant reminder to people as to what it is, the harm, the dangers of eating too much sugar, eating too much salt, and not exercising, not moving. And so I think what we have to do in the coming months and years is really to ramp up those programs and to have it sustained where communities can take it on their own to say, and also in the workplace. So we do have workplace, Jamaica Moves in the workplace. I think it has to be where persons in the communities understand what should be done, what must be done, and for them to also take the baton from us as we show them what to do and to continue that. And so I think the Ministry of Health and Wellness will continue to do our part and play our part. One of the things that I enjoyed was we did a few Jamaica Moves in some communities, and whilst we're showing persons how to eat, how to exercise, we're also checking their blood pressure, checking their, to see if anybody has diabetes, etc. But we want to show people how to eat, because a lot of times what I find is when you talk about healthy eating, persons believe that it is very, very expensive, which yes, it can be. But I think there are simple ways and simple things with our foods that we can actually use. And we must show people in different communities with the resources that they have to show them how they can, make the little that they have and make it healthy and nutritious for them. And so I think those are also some of the things that we must do, is to show people that this is your portion control, this is something that you have in your kitchen, and this is what you need to be eating. And so along with what we're doing, we're going to continue in the communities, we're going to continue with the churches, and as you said, there's an audience there in the church, where, as you said, the pastor could say a little something. So once we give them the information, we will expect the communities and the workplaces to continue, on the trend that we've showed them, to make sure that their employees and their congregants are doing those things.
Tell me, I'm sure that your ministry collaborated with the Ministry of Education in terms of the school nutrition policy.
That is correct. And they're doing a wonderful job. There are various priorities, of course, with this. Where the schools, they're going to be partnering with, RADA and small farmers. For me as a member of parliament, what I will be doing as soon as the CDF, thank God for that, Mr. Golden,
yes.
as soon as the CDF becomes available to us for this financial year, I will be assisting several schools in my constituency. Some of them, one I'm right now across from Stony Hill Vocational High, and they have a fabulous soul cube that I saw them just upgraded. So I will be giving them chicken. They have a farm. They have a little farmland. I will be giving them produce, things so that they can actually plant their vegetables, your carrots, your pak choy, or whatever. And so I will be helping a number of schools, and I believe this is some of the things that some of the MPs should be able to do as well, to get the schools, to help them with their nutrition program.
When you do that, I hope that you'll invite the editor of the Daily Gleaner to come with you and see what you're doing with the CDF.
Yes, that's good. I usually try to show that off, but the Gleaner, yes, I should, or with the newspaper, I should do that.
No, tell him no send a reporter, I must send the editor.
The editor.
Yes.
Okay, will do. And so we're Ministry of Education, they understand, they want to make sure that, they're also promoting the healthy eating habits, and also to include the physical activity, because we understand, studies have shown that 25 to 33% of the school-age children are coming to school hungry. And so we must address that.
Why is that, though?
When we have, I don't know, when you have banana, you could, my grandmother used to scrape, you grate the banana, you make banana or plantain porridge.
Yes.
If you don't have oats, and, pretty much everybody could have a banana tree once you're in the rural Jamaica, maybe not so much in the city. But
I understand that we have a level of poverty in Jamaica that's almost endemic.
Right.
And the people who perhaps will forever have to depend on assistance. But with the PATH program, with the resourcefulness that country people are supposed to have, I wonder if it's not just carelessness. I wonder if it's not just, I'm going to give you a big dinner this evening so you don't need none to go to school with. Or whether they are sort of expecting or maybe trying to cajole the school into providing them with breakfast. Because some schools do.
Yeah, I think a study would have to show, and you're right, some schools do. I've also helped out some schools with their nutrition program by giving them breakfast, buying in bulk and having it there for them. Because the principal will say to me, the students are coming to school hungry. And let me say, I'm in a rural constituency. I'm not sure why. Because it's a very much of a farming community where you could have the ground provision, and I don't know how, because again, you have plantain porridge. This morning my daughter made sure she had some oats, the oat porridge, because she have track and field later. But again, as you said, parents must understand that there are certain things that they can do to help their kids' nutrition. And if it is even to plant something in the backyard, to make sure that they're doing that so that they have at least some of the things at their disposal for their children.
Lord, man, if it's even a little piece of sweet potato, then must eat something before them go to school. Yeah?
Exactly.
Now,
I think it is possible, especially when you're in rural Jamaica.
Yeah. You mentioned very importantly, before you go, that you're now engaging the food manufacturers. How is that dialogue going? Is there cooperation? Do they understand the importance of this to the country?
Well, as you know, Minister Tufton is the head of that. I'm with the Jamaica Moves mainly, and so he's the one in dialogue with those manufacturers. I think they're making some headways, and so I think hopefully by later this year, we'll hear more. But he's the one really in dialogue with those manufacturers.
Minister Cuthbert-Flynn, welcome to the program. Thanks for having joined us, and thanks for having helped us with this discussion. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All righty.
Welcome back. It's Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nutrition. And we started out, focusing the discussion largely on children. But as the discussion has progressed, it is becoming clear that this is something that affects the entire population. And even if it's just children you're talking about, the parents have a significant role to play in helping to mold the behavior of the children, molding their tastes, the kind of things that they like. A child, for example, may not like callaloo, for argument's sake. But if you prepare the callaloo, there's a coconut milk in it, it can make a world of difference to how it tastes. And they may jump into it and say, but I didn't know it could taste so good. So all of us have a role to play in this. I'm pleased to be joined now by Ms. Barbara McGaw, who is the project manager of Global Health Advocacy Project at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica. Ms. McGaw, do we have you online? No, we don't. Are we getting her? Are we hoping to have her? We're trying to see if we can link up. The Heart Foundation has been doing a very serious and purposeful job in terms of trying to sensitize people about the importance of healthy nutrition. They, of course, are primarily concerned with cardiac health, no? And they have done some really excellent work helping people who have challenges with heart issues, heart disease. I know a number of persons who wouldn't have made it were it not for the intervention of the Heart Foundation. So it's a very sturdy, very focused organization, and we wanted to discuss with them their emphasis now on nutrition. We tried to see if we can get Miss Barbara McGaw. I think I was told that she was traveling abroad, but we would have been able to connect with her. We're not getting through. No, it doesn't seem as if we're going to be able to make contact with her, which is a pity because I would have loved to have heard their insight, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, in this matter. One of the things I'm hoping that this program would have done today, is help in the public awareness, help to sensitize people. You are what you eat, no? And if you keep stuffing junk food into your body, then it's junk gone in there, and not all of that junk is going to come out. Some of it is going to stay there and do what junk does best, which is to slowly destroy some of the critical organs and critical cells in the body. Sometimes when you see people, as they get older, they start to have all kind of problems and ailments. Some can hardly walk, high blood pressure, diabetes. You have to do what you can to help them, but sometimes some of them brought it onto themselves because they were just so careless in terms of how they took care of themselves. One of the things that we haven't spoken about much, we did to some extent with Dr. Soares-Wynter, is that nutrition is only one part of the puzzle. The other part of the puzzle, of course, is our level of activity. And it will vary from people to people. I mean, there are people who the nature of the job they do keeps them very active. Somebody may have a job, and if you were to really check it out, in the course of working for 8 hours from 9 to 5, they may have walked 2 miles. It's just the nature of the work. But then there are so many of us who that's not the nature of our work. We spend most of those 8 hours behind a desk or sitting at a table in meetings and so on. So an important component to the good nutrition policy has to be physical activity, which is why this Jamaica Moves thing that Minister Tufton came up with is so important. And he seems to have been getting quite a response to it. We just need to make it more a kind of everyday habit for more people, because that is also an important part in terms of trying to straighten out our nutrition defects, and they are there. If we're not going to get Miss McGaw, we're going to move on, or do we have her on? Hello? No, we don't. We do have her on now? I get all kind of signals through the glass. Miss McGaw, are you there?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Golding. I apologize. We had a little technical difficulty.
Well, I'm glad that we got over it. Now tell me, the Heart Foundation is concerned and has been, and has really been a stellar performer in terms of dealing with issues of the heart. And I'm not talking about emotional issues, no, I'm talking about health issues.
Yes.
But you have, and I know of many people who have really got tremendous assistance from the Heart Foundation. But you have been put particularly in charge of Global Health Advocacy Project. What is that all about?
Yes. So the Global Health Advocacy Project is looking at options for healthy eating and healthy lifestyle in light of the frightening statistics that have been shared as regards obesity and overweight, not only in our children, but in our adults. So this campaign, this project looks at advocacy to support policies that can help to reduce the tide of NCD.
Tell me, a lot of people come to you with issues having to do with the state of their heart, no? I mean, that is your sort of focus of business. But
part of it, yes.
Yeah, but could you even give me a ballpark, even a top of the head figure of every 10 persons who you see at the Heart Foundation? How many of them would you say the question of bad nutrition was a significant factor in the heart issues that they're having? It's
difficult. It's like the cart before the horse. Do you look at bad nutrition leading to heart conditions, non-communicable diseases, or do you look at non-communicable diseases having an impact on how people eat, the food environment, food security, food safety? So it is a whole range, Mr. Golding. What I can tell you is that COVID has exacerbated this issue a lot for various reasons. Not being able to get home-cooked food, getting industry donating fast food to very worthy causes. Some of the fast food companies supporting sporting events, athletic events, so it's difficult. And choices, and as I'm sure you're on the road, you see all these little bikes. The delivery of food has mushroomed.
Yes.
And I'm sure one of the fastest growing businesses. So you're at home and you can't bother. You just call, and within a half an hour, somebody's at your gate with the food. So the options, unhealthy options, are easy to access. They are marketed as such,
But ideally, we should be able to use the delivery service and order healthy food, no?
Well, that is the thing too. But again, the numbers of places that have healthy options are far less.
Why
in the areas?
Why is that? Is it that the food providers, the restaurants, are simply responding to the taste demands of their customers? Or is it that it's cheaper to provide junk food?
Well, I think when you are looking at bulk, like I don't want to call any names, but any of the fast food, the kind of numbers that they produce on a daily basis will allow, it to be less expensive, so to speak. And then they marry it. You have a chicken, then you have your fries and a drink and so on. In fact, a couple of the restaurants here in Jamaica have won awards from their main companies to have sold the most whatever per year or per, and it's easy. And during COVID, it just made it worse, Mr. Bowling, because you just couldn't be bothered. You're on the way home, or you're locked up at home. The children, it's just, for example, when my kids were younger, a fast food was like a treat. Maybe once a month, if they did well in their thing. But now you have people stopping on the fast food to get breakfast to take the children to school.
Well, what amazes me when I drive past them is the line of vehicles sometimes even blocking the main road.
Exactly. And it's an issue of concern. And we have to be, and I know you have espoused this thing, we have to be more preventive, not prescriptive afterwards. How can we prevent persons from getting NCDs? How can we reduce the incidence of obesity in our children? 1 out of 3, we're saying that every child survives, 15% or under have obesity or overweight problems. In the adults, it's actually 1 in 2 adults is overweight or obese, and that was the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey.
Now tell me, I was just talking to Minister Cuthbert-Flynn, and she told me that Minister Tufton is in dialogue with some of the food manufacturers.
Yes.
To try to get that. Are you engaged in that any at all?
We do communicate with them.
No, but are you part of that dialogue that the minister is conducting?
Not directly, because we have had a couple of campaigns like the sugary drinks tax.
Yes.
And you don't want to hear that word.
Yes.
Call it a levy. But the fact is, the kind of funds that you can get from a tax like that could fund school feeding programs. It could give subsidies to agriculture.
Yes.
And what it does, some people will use less, some people won't.
But I suggested as well, that perhaps we need to apply some more muscle. I mean, you're mentioning about, well, that's exactly what we did with alcohol and tobacco.
I remember, and tobacco,
So,
Jamaica is one of the only countries in the Latin American region that has earmarked taxes for tobacco.
Yeah.
And that money goes back, a part of it goes back to the National Health Fund.
Yes.
It is a case study in point.
Yeah. But what
So there are other things like your policy for the school nutrition.
Yes.
And that has been advanced. And the Minister of Education and the Minister of Health have been working closely together to have that policy. It has reached a green paper, and they had stakeholder consultations. So they're at the point now where they will be preparing it to submit to Cabinet for implementation.
Well, I was suggesting to Minister Cuthbert-Flynn that we perhaps have to even go a little further. I was telling her of my experience in a supermarket recently where I saw the shelf that had bully beef.
Yes.
Some of the bully beef tins had marked on the label, less sodium.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering whether, well, if that is true, I'm wondering whether the Bureau of Standards ought not to be brought into action to say, now, look, we're going to lay down rules as to how much sodium can be in any gram of food, so that if bully beef can be produced with lower sodium levels,
right,
then we're not going to allow the one with the high sodium level to come into the country at all.
And one of the other things we can do, Mr. Goling, that the Bureau of Standards started working on, and the Heart Foundation is intimately involved, is the front of package labeling.
Yes.
Because what people need to know, they have a right to know what's in their food.
Yes.
So even if it has a label of fat, salt, or sugar, you have a choice.
And they need to take the trouble to read it.
Take the trouble, but the current nutrition fact panel at the back is not easy to read. And when you look at it, you have to multiply it by the amount of serving. So you might look at it and say, oh, this is only 5 grams of fat, but then it's 4 servings.
Yeah, and I find too that sometimes the print is so fine that my 75-year-old eyes can't read it.
So what we are promoting is the front of package labels that will give people the choice. Now, a study was done locally. You have your international studies and your regional studies. A study was done between the Ministry of Health and Wellness, UTEC, and PAHO on 4 or 5 labels. And the black octagon model was found to be the most effective label for people to assess the health of this food. So again, Mr. Gole, it's not that you'll stop eating it, but let us say you like it. You may once a week instead of twice a week, because now you're aware, because a lot of people are not aware. For example, a 2-liter soda at a fast food restaurant is 52 teaspoons of sugar.
What is
you couldn't eat 52, but you could drink a liter or half a liter. So again, it's just how you lay out, the information for people to make informed choices.
Well, this is very helpful. Very, very. Are there any countries that they have the front of packaging requirement?
Several. I can send you data. We have Argentina. We have a couple of countries in South America that have already done. Mexico, which is the second largest trader to the U.S., they have front of package labels. So there's Argentina, Chile. Chile, it was the band leader. Chile was the one that started this, and they have found it to be very effective. So what we do, we have some maps that can tell you where in the world has front of package labeling. Now, this was a option given by the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, their National Mirror Committee.
Yes.
And there was a process. Civil society was involved, as well as, academia and so on. But there was a change in vote, and it's uncomfortable. I'm not sure what happened, but the fact is that at first we were in favor of this label, and then all of a sudden, in terms of the groups, they, were not in favor.
Oh.
So Cabinet was asked to review, and they are to give their findings.
Yes.
Because again, we have local data that proves it beyond a shadow. So it's not something that we make up or we have to get something from the BMJ or anywhere else. We actually have local data that can support this whole evidence base.
Well, we need to get that done.
We can.
Let me thank you so much for joining me. I know it was a bit inconvenient for you today, but I want to tell you I really appreciate it.
We're always happy to share information with you, Mr. Golding.
Good. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much.
Ms. Barbara McGaw, Project Manager of the Global Health Advocacy Project at the Heart Foundation of Jamaica. Some very interesting points have come out of these conversations that we have had, including this last one that about the front of label requirements. I wasn't sure when I heard it being talked about. I wasn't sure whether that was something that we would have been unique in applying, but what she's telling us is that no, a number of other countries have done it. Started out led by Chile. And I hope that whatever it is that is the dispute can be resolved. She said the matter is now with Cabinet, who I expect Cabinet will make a final decision on that matter. We're hoping to be joined now by Dr. Charah Watson, who is the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council, the SRC. Do we have her online? Trying to see if we can get Dr. Watson, because the Scientific Research Council does quite a bit of work, in terms of food processing processes, if you understand what I mean. They do research and they develop processes for manufacturing food. And one of the things I wanted to discuss with them is whether or not they are being influenced in terms of the research and the development that they are doing, whether they are being influenced in terms of the nutritional standards or best practices in terms of the nutritional quality that they want to make available. Another part of the problem, of course, is whether or not the processes that they develop are being taken up by the food manufacturers and food processors. And if not so, why not so? I know of some cases, for example, where some manufacturers felt that the processes that they were being encouraged to take up would involve a whole different kind of pricing of inputs and so on, which would probably damage their presence in the market. But I don't know that that can be the case in all such instances. Any word on Dr. Watson? Not ready yet? As I said, we're hoping to talk with Dr. Charah Watson, the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council. There's one thing that keeps sticking in my... You want me to take a break now? Yeah, we'll take a break. Be back shortly. Welcome back. Jamaica Live. We're on Bridge 99. Today we're talking about nutrition standards, nutrition policy. And we're very pleased to be joined now by Dr. Charah Watson, who is the Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council. Dr. Watson, do I have you online?
You.
Hello, how are you?
I am very good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
What role is the SRC playing in terms of nutrition policy? There's a policy out now for schools, but the nutrition is an issue on which the Ministry of Health has been engaged as a crusade for some time. Mm-hmm. The Heart Foundation of Jamaica is very involved in it as well. What role has the SRC been asked to play in terms of this campaign?
Yes. So the SRC is one of the partners, and we support in several ways. So there is one of the fundamental ways is reviewing what currently exists and where we want to go, and identifying what needs to be in the policy as it relates to the specification of the quality of our foods. So the SRC is a part of a food task force, which has been tasked. Well, one of the activities of the task force is to look at the landscape in terms of how do we analyze the food, how do we know what we have in order to know what we need to have. So we are tasked with identifying specific tests, equipment that would be required to support institutions such as ours or other institutions in the public system to be able to analyze the foods that are being produced or imported on our markets. Another thing that we have been very instrumental in is also in reformulation exercise, because as we know, lifestyle of our populace has been changing. Persons are not as active as they used to be, and therefore the food profile that is available to us need to adapt, because when you're talking about nutrition, it's not just what you eat, it's also the lifestyle that you lead, because we know someone that is extremely active can eat food that are nutrient dense versus someone who lives a sedentary lifestyle. So a part of that is product reformulation, and as you know, Ministry of Health and Wellness have specific guidelines and stipulation as it relates to sugar content or salt content or trans fat content that should or should not be in food that are available to different populations. They've been looking at implementing in schools. So the SRC plays a role in that, in both testing as well as helping to lead reformulation exercise to educate manufacturers as well as consumers in developing and producing products that will meet those specific guidelines that we are setting out.
Tell me, how do the food manufacturers respond to your intervention? In other words, you may look at particular processes and say, no, if you do it this way, you'll be providing a healthier product. Are they responding, or are they just regarding you as a nuisance?
No, they're extremely responsive, and this is one of the things I'm proud of, especially when we do these engagements. Some are organized by the SRC, and most are through the Ministry of Health. They're extremely responsive. They're extremely open to learning new things as well as taking new approaches to what they're doing. They've been extremely accommodating and welcoming in terms of they wanting to get us to have foods that are healthier options for our populace. The challenge that you do find is that it's not a simplistic process. When you're talking about reformulation, you have to look at many things. Sometimes, do we have the technology to make the changes? You also have to consider the consumer perspective and what they're expecting, because persons will identify a particular food and associate it with a memory or something and want it to taste the same way. How do we change the profile of this food while considering what the consumer perspective might be? So those are some of the drawbacks that the manufacturer have to take in consideration, because again, it is a business. You understand that, and they understand this, because without being able to service their client or their market needs, then the business would no longer be viable. So how do we work with all those considerations to get us to a product that will meet the market acceptance, as well as allowing our manufacturers to effectively implement the changes that they need in terms of when they're reformulating the food. And they've been very welcoming to the SRC and the Ministry of Health, because we do a lot of this in partnership. And a lot have even gone on because we do product development on behalf of manufacturers, whether large, small, or micro enterprises. And you find that now when we're getting these requests for beverages or particular food, they are the ones that are telling us that we needed to look this particular way because this is where Ministry of Health is saying, and this is where we're going. So based on that, I'm saying I'm very proud of our manufacturers, because they understand where we are and understand where we need to be, and they've been open to the process. There are nuances, but we're working through them.
I'm very glad to hear that. How much of the problem we have is due to kind of ingrained taste orientation? Let me tell you where I'm going. In an earlier discussion, I think it was when I was talking to Dr. Soares-Wynter of the Caribbean Institute of Health Research, the issue of baby formula came up. Mm-hmm. And I happened to have been right behind somebody at a cashier's counter the other day in a supermarket. And she was buying a tin of baby formula. And I can't remember what the price was, but when it was rung up on the machine, it was very expensive. And what I want to put to you is, wouldn't that baby not be better off if the mother, instead of buying expensive formula, was preparing something that is as nutritious and perhaps even more nutritious, that could be prepared much less expensively?
Which I fully agree, and it makes total sense, because the palate that you have as a teenager, adult, is what you develop from your in utero and from you come out. If you're accustomed to consuming products with low salt, low sugar, that's what your palate will be developed to.
Yes,
so when you taste something otherwise, you just need to try it for a week or two, reduce the sugar intake, and then in the following week, try something that you normally have. You'd be like, oh my God, this is so sweet, or this is so salt. So you have to train the palate. And this is why it is extremely important that we are educating and informing our populace from as early as possible.
Well, I told the story of a friend of mine who had heart problems and had surgery. And since that, he doesn't eat food with any salt. And I said to him one day, I'm sitting on at lunchroom, I said, but the food must taste bad without salt. And
it will not.
And he said to me, once you get accustomed to it, salt tastes bad.
It takes 8 days to form an habit on average. And believe me, if you go through 2 weeks of gradually changing what you normally do, eventually that change will come easier, which is why the approach that has been taken by the Ministry of Health in terms of the reduction in the sugar content, it was a periodic change. So in year 1, they wanted to reduce the sugar to, say, 10 milligrams per 100 ml. Year 2, they reduced that to 5 milligrams of sugar per 100 ml. And by year 3, you're expecting that the palate of the children will be changing. So you're not recognizing that distinct difference in the sugar content, and you accept it. I give you a story. My friend who has a son who happens to be autistic, and his diet has shown to be very impactful in terms of his outcomes. She only blend food products and natural products, give him, and non-dairy products. And if you should try give that child a regular apple juice, he will not have it. But if you give him water or give him a freshly blended juice, he drinks, and this is a 2-year-old, he drinks it like it's heaven. What the palate is accustomed to.
But I grew up believing that milk was good for you. What are you saying? Dairy not good for you?
For some persons, they're intolerant.
I know, there are some people who are, but if you're not intolerant, is it best to avoid it?
It's a good source of calcium, because we don't get calcium from a lot of the food sources that we consume on average. So milk has been pushed primarily for the high levels of calcium. So when you're changing, which is why supplementation is very important.
But it has a lot of fat, no?
It does have a high fat content, but again, high fat is dependent, whether it's food or bad, is dependent on your lifestyle. So when you're talking about diet and food, you cannot take lifestyle out of that conversation.
Activity.
It would be a very imbalanced and not fully accurate picture if you talk about just food intake and not talk about the lifestyle or activity level of the individual.
Now tell me now.
Yes.
The big demons, sugar, salt, saturated fats. Who is number 1, who is number 2, who is number 3?
Saturated fat will be the only one that I would classify as a demon, because regardless of your lifestyle, it will still have an adverse effect. Sugar and salt, not so much if you have an active lifestyle to match what your intake levels are. If you're in a sedentary position, you don't do your minimum 30-minute exercise per day, then almost any amount of sugar, any amount of salt becomes problematic, because your body is always relatively in a rested state and not utilizing it.
But part of the problem, though, is how do you manage it, though? Because I don't know if anybody can get to the stage where every meal they can measure how much salt they're taking in, how much sugar. I have a bad habit, you see. It's a bad habit that I acquired from my grandmother, who was born in St. Elizabeth, and I'm told that it is a St. Elizabeth trait. I have to have a cup of coffee every morning. I only have 1 cup. But here's the habit now.
Yes.
I put salt in the coffee.
What? I've never heard that.
And people ask me, where that come from? I say I inherited it from my
I've
grandmother.
Never heard that.
And if you give me a cup of coffee and it doesn't have salt, it's tasteless to me.
Oh, So
no, my problem is if you have to have a little salt in your coffee,
yes.
what are you doing in the course of the rest of the day to make sure that you balance back out your salt intake?
Right.
I mean, I don't know how you do that.
It's going to be important.
I mean, when I go to a Chinese restaurant,
yes,
I've never been able to understand why it is that Chinese cook rice without salt.
right.
So when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I
salt.
have to say to them, can you bring me some salt, because the rice don't taste good without a little salt in it.
Right. So there's one thing fundamental. Our body processes our nutrients intake differently. So your genetics, your metabolic process might be one that maybe you perspire more than someone else, so you're losing salt at a higher level than someone else. That allows your body to manage a higher level of salt intake than another person. So there's that subjectivity to it. That is one. And secondly, your lifestyle. If you're a very active person, it means that you will require more minerals. So that is on the consumption side. On the other side of things is what you need to look at. You have to be mindful of how you prepare your food, and those that you're not preparing, how they're typically prepared, and if you have the information as it relates to the nutritional facts of it. So you have to, I recommend that every person at different stage of their life, as a child, you need to see a nutrition specialist. It should be a part of the health care that you receive when you're taking your child to the clinic, and they will tell you this is what the child should be eating at this age. As a teenager, it will change. As a young adult, it will change. As a senior citizen, it will change. You have to be able to speak with a nutrition specialist to ensure that what you're taking in is right for you at that particular stage in life that you are. Plus, it is very subjective.
Plus the self-discipline. I mean,
definitely.
For example, I find that as I get older, I have less and less appetite. So very often in the evenings, I instead of a big plate of food, I end up with a salad. And that's all I need, and I'm good to go,
Listen to your body. Your body tells you go through these changes, but some of us are so trained to eat in a big plate of food. If I eat a salad now, I tell you I haven't eaten. Or I say I only had a salad because my brain is accustomed to a solid plate of food.
Yes.
So I still feel like I'm lacking something, so I'm not listening to my body to say, yes, the salad is enough. My brain is still telling me I need more. So we have to listen, and we have to develop those habits.
And we have to be obedient to what our body is telling us.
Hey,
Dr. Watson,
thank
you so much for coming on today.
Most
you've been very helpful, and you have brought value to the discussion. Thank you so much. Dr. Charah Watson, Executive Director of the Scientific Research Council. That brings us to the end of the program for today. Hopefully, God willing, I'll be back next week, Monday. We're planning a program of a different kind next week, Monday. But I'm going to keep you in suspense. I'm not telling you about it yet. Next week, Monday, when I come, we'll put that program together. Thank you so very much.